Welcome to Target Market Insights, the Multifamily and Marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights, the Multifamily and Marketing podcast. I am your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for checking out this wonderful show. Now, listen here. If you have loved this podcast, if you've gotten great value out of each episode, or at least any episode you've listened to, then I need you to leave us a 5-star rating and review. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Stephen Pesavento. Stephen Pesavento is the host of the Investor Mindset podcast, an active investor who flipped over 200 homes within his first 3 years in the business. Based out of Denver, he manages teams out of state and is an expert at finding and funding deals. Through his top-rated podcast and private membership community, he brings together real estate investors focused on growing their business and their lives, uniting around the belief that investing in yourself leads to the biggest ROI. Now, through modeling others, he was able to escape the corporate grind of management consulting by focusing on building better beliefs, better habits, and taking better action. Let's welcome to the show, Stephen Pesavento.
What's going on? I'm excited to be here.
Stephen, it's good to have you on the show, and I'm excited to talk to you. Look, I went through your bio fairly quickly. Why don't you take 1 minute and explain yourself and give our listeners a little bit more context for who you are?
Well, first off, thank you all your listeners for all the support for John. I've loved this podcast. I love what you guys have put together here. And so a little bit about me. I'm the host of the Investor Mindset podcast, where we really dive into the mindset and motivation of really successful investors and thought leaders, interviewing people like, Jay Papasan of The One Thing, Chris Voss of Never Split the Difference, our very own, our host here, Mr. John Kasman himself, and many other real estate pros from across the industry. And I really got into that because, mindset and really modeling other people's success was what allowed me to have success in real estate. In my first year, I did over 75 deals, coming in with no experience and having none of my own money, right? I definitely leveraged all the credit I could possibly get to get started. And one of the big things was I had a lot of limiting beliefs, and thank goodness I was able to learn some of these strategies to break through, because since then, I've done over 200 deals, and it's been a fun journey, and I absolutely love it. And what I love most is how real estate investors and professionals in general are almost all focused on growth. We all have this vision of a better life, of be able to create something for our families in a way that, most other industries or the corporate world, a lot of those people aren't living with those beliefs. So I'm grateful to be here, and that's just a little nugget about me.
Stephen, I love that, man. And we're definitely going to dive into that nugget you just gave about how you grew to 75 deals in your first year. And if I'm not mistaken, you had no experience and no cash, right?
Yeah, no experience and no cash. No connections, nothing.
So Stephen, that sounds like an infomercial, right? That sounds like it's too good to be true. I mean, that's what you hear in the late night infomercials. Get into real estate with no money and no experience, no cash, and do it now. And you're telling me that actually worked for you.
It absolutely worked for me. And here's the truth. This is not going to work for a lot of people, because a lot of people aren't going to have the same commitment and burn the boats mentality to be able to make it happen. But, growing up, I learned very early that money was, the root of all evil, and not because of money itself, is because we didn't have any of it. So I was definitely on this path of, well, I've got to go and get some, I've got to create some. And in the corporate world, I realized very early on, okay, well, money isn't the answer. It's definitely a big piece of the equation, but it's not the only piece. And passion is, and doing something you love is, and be able to create something that's really important is. And so when I finally decided to jump into real estate, it had been years and years of me wanting to do it and not doing it because I had limiting beliefs, because I didn't believe that I had enough experience, that I didn't have the right connections, that I didn't have money, that I didn't have, the right parents or any of that stuff. And so I kept telling myself, well, not today, maybe next year, maybe another time. And then finally, I remember specifically jumping up and just deciding, yes, I am doing this and I'm going all in. And I went a direction I don't recommend a lot of people do, but I fired all of my existing marketing clients. I stopped having any other way to make any money, and I jumped in with both feet and went at this. And so I had no choice but to survive, and therefore I had no choice but to make this thing happen. And because of that kind of mentality of like, I'm either going to sink or I'm going to swim, I was able to do quite a few deals, and I was able to do it pretty fast.
That's amazing, man. And I love the fact that you talk about your perspective of money. And you said, money being the root of all evil, but it was really the lack of money and not having the money that was really the root of the problems and the challenges. And you got to a point where you realized, you know what, you had these limiting beliefs that were holding you back from getting into real estate and kind of creating the lifestyle that you envisioned. And you had kind of your corporate clients, your marketing clients. You decided to fire them all, burn the bridges, burn the boats. And you were fully committed to building this real estate business with no cash and no experience. So you got to help me understand mentally, what pushed you over the edge, or what was that moment that made you say, I'm going all in on real estate, even though I don't have the experience or the capital to do it right now?
It's one of those things where I think it's kind of like you hit threshold. It's been building up over years and years and years. So, of course, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was 17. I realized, oh, wow, this book could change my life. I went to college and read, Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And then I went into the corporate world and I reread it. And I realized very quickly, like, wow, I'm on this path and it's not really in alignment. And so I was continuing to make these changes when I look back. And I can see that all the pieces start lining up, all those experiences, all those failed attempts at entrepreneurship, at going out and trying my own thing. And then finally, I had this moment. I had these really terrible headaches for about 2.5, 3 years. The kind of headaches that I would call on a level, a pain scale of like a 3 or 4 out of 10 every day, never going away. And they would go all the way up to a 7 where I couldn't do anything. And then I had this kind of spiritual moment. I had this spiritual healer who did some work on me, and the headaches literally went away. I can't explain it. I won't try to on a real estate podcast. But what it did do was it opened my mind to being ready to accept that, okay, there is another path for me and that I can go down that path. And it was because I got in alignment with what I actually wanted and what I was meant to do. And because I got on that path, I was able to, jump up and say, hey, well, not another day is going to go by without me going after a dream. If I'm going to fail, let me fail, but let me at least step out and try it and not have the fear of, what are other people going to think? The fear of what is it going to be like if I don't make that next dollar? At the end of the day, in some ways I did fail. I failed over and over and over again until I finally made it happen. And, because I got started out in single family and in wholesaling and flipping in particular, it doesn't take that much to really get there, right? It's definitely a hustle type of business. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's one of those businesses where if you're willing to put in the hard work and you're willing to continue to get up over and over again, if you get knocked down, you're going to be able to make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 wholesale checks without a doubt. Now, it's not all going to happen at once and it's not going to be easy, but it's a pretty simple business when you think about it.
So, Stephen, let's talk about the business a little bit, because one of the things I'm always intrigued with wholesaling, first of all, is 2 things. One, it's more work than I think most people realize, because you really do have to understand the numbers. You pretty much have to understand, rehab like a flipper, and being able to get deals, like anyone on any kind of acquisitions business. So you really have to understand both sides of the business to really be able to be a good wholesaler, unlike so many people who are misled into believing that wholesaling is easy and anybody can do it. While you didn't have experience, you don't need cash. That usually equates to more time. So, and you had marketing clients before, so I know you've got a little bit of a marketing background. So talk to us about kind of how you got into it, how you structured the business, and what marketing levers did you pull to try to get those deals starting out?
Well, I worked in, digital marketing for a while. And so I read Gary Halbert's letters very early on and started learning a lot about copywriting and using the right kind of wording to essentially, signal to somebody to take a certain kind of action. And so when I finally jumped into real estate, it's one of the few industries where direct mail still actively works. And it's one of those places where, I send out a letter or a postcard, And I am looking for a direct response from that person. And that response is either, hey, yeah, give me a call and tell me that you're interested. Hey, give me a call and tell me that you're not interested. Throw it away, which tells me that you're not interested, or maybe save it for the future, which I'm going to chalk up as a you're not interested. So when you're doing a direct response kind of marketing, you're looking for a response from that person right then and there. And you're able to analyze and understand, well, did this work or did this not? And so when I dove into real estate, I didn't know that that skill was going to be transferable. But when I finally dove in, I was like, okay, wow, I am essentially just going after a customer. I don't know that customer, but I've got to get them, the ones who have some interest, to pick up the phone and give me a call. And so, wholesaling is probably one of the hardest ways to get into the business. Now, it is one of the lowest cost ways to get into the business. And as a result, that leads to a lot of people getting started in that space. And I want to say over and over again, it can be an amazing place for somebody to build some confidence, for somebody to go make a little bit of money and start seeing what's possible, and to go out and really take a risk. But it's probably the lowest risk you can take, because you're going to spend some marketing dollars, you're going to spend some time, but you're not necessarily spending $150,000 or $500,000 of money that you were lent to go do a flip. But as a result, you're only going to get 1/10 or 1/3 of the kind of return that somebody is going to get until you're doing it at a professional level. So I am so grateful that this is where I started. And I'm so grateful that I'm here now, because I know that if anything ever happened to me, if I ever think about a worst case scenario, I know that I'm only 30 to 60 days away from a $10,000 check. If I'm willing to put in that hard effort of grinding it out on the phone, of doing the marketing, of answering the calls, of following up with sellers, of having those difficult sales conversations, and finally getting something closed on the back end, I know what's possible, that money can be created. Now, from an investment perspective, we're not really investing. In my eyes, I really think, I'm a real estate marketer. I'm going out and I'm marketing for properties, and I'm figuring out how I can get in front of people. And, it's a great way to get to know a lot about the business, but it can be difficult, because if you're not actively flipping houses, then you don't really know whether or not you're getting a good deal or not until you've actually done it a little bit. But I think it's a great way to get started, especially if you don't have the funds, but you definitely are going to have to put in the time to be able to make some money work.
You called yourself a real estate marketer, and I think that's a great explanation and a great way to picture kind of the work you're really doing. How are you finding deals and kind of converting sellers when you reach out to them?
Yeah, so talking about it from kind of like a high level perspective going down, we got to figure out, who are we going after? Who is our target? What kind of motivation do they have? What a kind of motivational event might be going on in their life that they'd have an interest of selling to an investor at some kind of discounted rate for the service we provide? And then what channel are we going to go through to reach that person? And how often are we going to do that? And in what way are we going to be able to serve them? So for us, when I was getting started, direct mail was my number one channel. It was the go-to channel. And the second was pay-per-click. I've since changed my channels. Today, I'm focused a lot on text messaging while we're still able to do it, while it still works. And I'm also focused on cold calling. I have a team of people who are calling folks. They essentially get folks to raise their hand. And then our inbound team actually talks with them, who are, local people who've been working for me for quite a while. So essentially what's happening is I'm reaching out to that person gets some kind of marketing message, and we want to be there at the right time when they have that motivational event going on in their life. And in our business in particular, and it's true in every business, there's something that puts somebody in a buying type of mode when they get triggered into being interested in buying. And in our case, a purchase is actually a sale, right? They're going to sell us their house. That's them buying into our marketing message. So when somebody's ready to sell, if I show up at the right time, I'm going to get them to pick up the phone and give me a call. And then we're going to work through our sales process, which is really, if you try to think of sales as just a process of disqualifying somebody or understanding their situation, we're going to ask them a lot of questions. We're going to get to know what's going on. We're going to build rapport. And then we're going to figure out, well, is this something that we can help them with? And from there, obviously, we go through the process of meeting with them, analyzing the house, and deciding if we're going to buy. But in this business in particular, and I think it's true in a lot of businesses, it's less about the product It's less about the sale, and it's what can we do for them. And so we've got to understand their specific situation, because this is for them, it's probably their biggest asset, the biggest thing that they own. And it takes a little bit for them to make that decision to buy, or in this case, to sell.
Yeah, you hit on something right there towards the end, talking about, is this something we can help them with, and really understanding their situation, their perspective. And the reason I'm highlighting that is I think a lot of times we focus on, getting the deal, right? And getting the sale and closing, and whether it's right for them or not. Sometimes people and the ethics kind of creep in there, but it's focusing on getting the close and getting the sell. And you didn't say that. You talked about helping them and whether or not you could help them based on their situation and what they're looking for. And, coming from a position of serving others will make life so much easier in business, because you feel great about what you're doing. You can be more transparent. You can be more energetic and empathetic about their situation and how you can help them. And if you get a great deal, that's good, but you're solving their problem, right? And sometimes people recognize that, yes, I know I could probably make more money if I were to sell this in the open market or list this with a realtor. But the reality is there are some reasons or something that is holding me back from doing that. And if I can sell today for a lower price point, that helps me more than, cleaning this place up and investing another $5K to make this, market ready or MLS ready, and selling it maybe 90 days or 120 days from now. So, really understanding the value you provide to them is really key. And, I would implore all of our listeners just to think about that. And whatever your business is, I mean, many of you may not be wholesalers per se, but I think this supersedes any industry. When you focus on how you create value and how you help others and how you serve them, I think that really extends and makes you a very valuable person that people want to do business with. And you become a trusted referral source where if they know someone else is going through a similar situation, they would be happy to call and let you know, hey, this person helped me out of a situation just like that. You should reach out to them. Do you get referrals, and do you get people who come back to you and thank you kind of after the process is over?
We've definitely had a lot of people come and thank us. We've been passed along to a few folks along the way. In this business, it's difficult because from a referral perspective, there's not a lot of times where somebody is going to go through this process twice, where they're going to sell a house at 20 or 30% discount from what it might be if they were going to put in a bunch of money and fix it up. So we really do have a transactional business, which is one of the downsides. It's one of the reasons why I'm very interested in growing into some other areas in real estate. It's because I really believe that a great business is one where you build a relationship with a customer, you can serve them for life. And in this business, we build a relationship with a customer in a really hard time of need. We serve them amazing in that time. We get great, testimonials. We do a great job for them, but we never, almost ever sell them again. And that's one of the things that's kind of a downfall about it. On the flip side, it's a business that is never going to go away because, frankly, we make people's lives a lot easier. Selling with a real estate agent can take 30, 60, 90 days, and sometimes people don't have it. And sometimes it's easier to say, hey, I'll take a little bit of a loss, or I'll put a little bit less money in my pocket, like trading in a car at the dealership, just to know that I'm done and that I can focus my effort elsewhere.
So let's talk about how you scale your business, right? So, I mean, that's, you mentioned some of the drawbacks, right? That most of the time, this is a transactional business. You're only doing business with this person one time. How else are you scaling your business then to kind of make this something that is bigger than just kind of these one-off transactions, and you actually have some systems and things like that allow you to grow?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, like, if it's transactional, then you've always got to be fishing. You've always got to be going out and finding new leads. So marketing is our number one cost. We put a lot of money into the marketing front, and it's one of those pieces where that's essentially what runs our business. If our marketing shut off, so would our income. And so we've got people for every type of role in the company, from people who answer the phones called lead managers to acquisition people who are sales folks out in the field, disposition managers who work directly with our buyers and understand what they're looking for and really service those people to get those deals closed. We have transaction coordinators to make sure that everything goes smooth. And then we've got processes for every one of those places so that we're running on a consistent basis in the exact same way, in the exact same format. And I think that's important no matter what business you're in. You want to ask yourself, is this something that you're going to do again? Is this something that you're going to do a third time? Well, if it is, then it's probably worth jotting down and making a little process for that and understanding, well, how do I do this? And is this something that I can delegate or I can pass off to another team member so that I can focus my effort on a different area of the business where I'm going to be able to add the most value? And so as we've scaled, we went from a team of 0 people when we started to a team of 15 people at our peak. And now we've actually scaled back down so that we can start moving into some other areas within the real estate space. But by having those processes and going through that, that process of creating those systems, now we really understand exactly what's expected of every person. So when anyone's hired into the company, they come on board, they know this is exactly what you're supposed to do. These are the numbers that you're measured on, and this is how we're going to get you trained up so you can go and kick butt.
And how do you manage the communications, right? You mentioned at one point having 15 employees. How do you manage the communication and kind of the flow of every single transaction across those 15 different employees?
Yeah. So the key is being very clear on who's responsible for what, right? So if an acquisition manager is working a lead, they've essentially been handed that lead from lead management, and they're the owners of it. They're responsible for it. But the lead manager is the one who delegated it. So they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for making sure that everything happens. So it's that person's job to essentially oversee and manage, this acquisition manager. So essentially what that does is it creates a little bit of redundancy. John is worried about what Mary's doing. And so John is going to check on and make sure that Mary is taking care of the customer in the right way. And then the same goes true when the acquisition manager passes it off to the transaction coordinator. They're going to make sure that that job is getting done and that they're up to date on what's going on. And one of the great things about this business is there's a lot of opportunities for commission because it is transactional. So people, when they're in a commission position, have a lot more, they care a lot more about what's happening with each of those deals because they know that it's going to directly hit their paycheck. It's true in a salary position, but when somebody's getting commission off of something and it falls through, they know that they're ultimately responsible for it. And so that's definitely one of the things that's helped us. We use some great tools like Slack. We have a CRM where it's kind of our record of truth, where all the information about that property goes into. And then we also, of course, do weekly meetings as a team and daily stand-up meetings to check in with people. Now, there's times where we don't do those daily stand-ups. And what we found is that it just depends on the team and how big that team is. As you get larger, you need to make sure you're coming together more often, or that you've got those times where people are stepping back together and saying, hey, this is a problem that I'm dealing with. How can we solve it? Otherwise, when you're working in a remote environment, people can be going off doing their own thing and nobody really has any clue that there's a problem.
Great points there. And I love the fact that you talked about, Slack and kind of your different CRM process where everyone can kind of come in, see where a property is, and it kind of has the trail of everything with that property. And then two, if you have a sales-based or commission-based a compensation package, then folks are going to be incentivized to make sure they do what they need to do to close on that property and make sure that they get the sale done. So great tips there for anyone who's looking to figure out how do you keep your team working and get the results that you're looking for in your business. We started talking earlier on about, your podcast, the Investor Mindset Podcast. And before we talk about that, I do want to talk about just mindset a little bit more. So, you talk about thoughts and how your thoughts and your beliefs lead to the actions that you ultimately end up taking. Can you elaborate and explain a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the most important things. And I think it's something that we often forget about. But the thoughts and beliefs that we hold is essentially our operating system if we think about ourselves as a computer. And based on that operating system, you're going to end up having a different output, those actions that you're going to take. So if I happen to believe that I'm not worthy of doing real estate, that I don't have the right skill sets, that I don't have the right background, and I'm not confident that I can go in that direction and do it, then I for surely won't be able to succeed in going after and getting started in real estate. If I believe that I can't raise money, raise capital, then I definitely can't do it. But if I start to adopt a set of beliefs that says, hey, I'm capable of doing this even if I'm unconfident about it, or because I see that person has been able to do it, I start to have, even if it's a very small belief, and I can start to water that belief and grow that belief until that belief is strong. And that belief can really drive me down the path of being able to take the right actions every single day to start seeing those results that I'm actually looking for. So in other words, what I'm saying is that if you're not taking the right actions in your business and you're not doing the right things on a regular basis, then you probably have some thoughts and beliefs that are holding you back. And some of that comes down to the habits that you're doing, which are based on the beliefs. And some of that is just based on the way that you grew up. If we grow up in a household where somebody's telling us we're not capable of doing this or we're never going to amount to anything, then we're probably going to believe that until we go back and we essentially erase those old thoughts. We replace them with new, more empowering ones. And so I think it's for a lot of people, we look always to the strategy of what we must be doing next in our business. But sometimes we need to actually look, well, what are we thinking? And how is these thoughts really holding us back from taking action on all the strategies we already know we should be doing?
No, I love that, man. You talked about the shift and how much our thoughts really drive our actions. Understanding the possibilities. You talked about raising capital, and if you don't believe that you can raise capital, then you won't. But if you change that to I can raise capital, I'm just not confident about how to do it right now, that could be the switch. How does one even start that dialogue? I mean, I think, around the New Year timeframe, when people do their New Year's resolution and goals, that's an ideal time where people start to really reflect and think about these kind of things. But what are some other ways where someone can actually stop and process maybe some of these limiting beliefs that are holding them back? Because I imagine many people just kind of go through the motions and wake up one day and just realize that they've never accomplished any of the goals that they actually have for themselves. So what are some things we can do to actually stop and reassess and, make sure we are being more intentional with our thoughts that, ultimately will lead to the actions that we take?
Well, a tactical step that you can take first off is just acknowledging that you have those. By just acknowledging, by being aware that that's a thought that you're having and being able to recognize that it's happening right there in that moment, that itself starts to disarm that thought or belief. It starts to actually give you some serious power to be able to change that in that moment. Another good way to do that is to acknowledge it and then to jot it down. Keep a journal with you and start writing down and recognizing, well, what is that thought or belief and what preceded it? What happened or what was I thinking right before it kind of triggered me to have this emotional response or have this thought or this feeling come up? And by doing that, without even trying to change anything, you're going to slowly open up your mind to recognizing, well, okay, well, I'm doing this. And then the next step is to start questioning some of those beliefs. If you have a belief that it's impossible for me to ever succeed in doing real estate, there's no way in heck that I could ever do that. Now, you might ask yourself a question like, is that really true? Is there any possibility that that could be false? And when you hear that, okay, well, there is a possibility that it could be false, you essentially cracked that belief. Even if it's still there and it's still strong, you've cracked that foundation and you can start chipping away at it little by little by starting to come up and create new reasons on why that isn't true, on how that could be false. And therefore, once you've broken up that foundation, you can actually replace it with a more empowering one. So you'll hear people talk about affirmations or incantations, somebody saying something that's really powerful to themselves, like I am confident or I am capable. People see the work that I do as extremely valuable. Whatever that incantation, that positive belief, you're essentially saying it to yourself with enough emotion so that you can start to take that inside and start to replace that old belief with the new one. So after you've broken the foundation, if you start to replace it with a new one, then that new belief has a place to start putting down roots and starting to grow. And it takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. It can happen in a moment because it just comes to this point where you start to realize and you make a decision that that's no longer true. But that doesn't mean you won't have relapses where this comes back up and you deal with old problems. But the important part is start recognizing it, start understanding what that is and where it comes from, and start questioning it and then replace it with something better. And I promise you, you'll start seeing results. It does take time, but I promise you, it'll make a big difference.
Yeah, Steve, and I know a lot of people who struggle with this because affirmations, it can be challenging because sometimes, and it depends on how you look at affirmations. But if you're saying things that you don't actually believe, there are people who say affirmations like I make $1 million a year. And it's like, you don't make $1 million a year, right? So it becomes challenging saying those things out loud when you're trying to affirm it. But I think what's worked for me and a handful of folks that I know is focusing on the things that you do believe, the things that are your strengths, the things that you get positive feedback from others on, whether it be a skill set that you have or things you do well in business or things that people admire about you. And by focusing on those things and allowing them to build or to cascade from there, that's a great way to, build that belief. And I'll just use an example for illustration purposes. I spent my career in marketing. You're obviously a phenomenal marketer with everything you were doing on the consulting side, as well as kind of what you're doing, running your business and being a real estate marketer. Well, you can look at that and say, yeah, but I can't raise money. Well, a lot of it is marketing. So if you can think about, I know how to find an audience. I know how to engage people, or I'm good at, having conversations and building relationships and building connections. Well, if you can do that, if you can do just those two things and just leave it right there for a moment, if you can focus on those things, that naturally starts to expand in being able to raise capital, is because it's really just building relationships and communicating key things to individuals. So part of what you have to do is root yourself in the things you truly believe in before you get into the space where you actually don't believe what you're saying. And now you kind of feel like you're contradicting yourself. And I think what Stephen is talking about is you have to push yourself into that uncomfort zone, right? And being uncomfortable to acknowledging it. And if you can acknowledge it, then you put yourself in a position to try to work towards being the type of person that you really want to be, as opposed to simply staying in the same space you're in today.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really good to underline that with an affirmation, I'm not telling you to tell yourself something that you don't believe. That's why you first must start breaking that foundation of that belief. You must start coming up with reasons on why that could not be true, and start looking back to your past of times where you were confident, times where you did raise money, times where you did whatever that belief was telling you that it's impossible for you to do. Look to examples of that or examples of other people, and then you can start to, use that as a foundation to build upon. But I think that's such a good point you make. You want to find a way that works for you, and if this specific strategy might not, but there definitely is one, and you just got to go and find it.
Yeah, I mean, takeaway is this: affirmations work. If you've tried it and it didn't work for you, try it a different way. Same thing with me with journaling, right? I know journaling works. People rave about journaling. I tried journaling, it didn't work for me. So it's like, all right, it's not journaling. It's the way I was journaling, right? So you have to step back and find another way, or talk to more people to find out how they do it. So Stephen gives us great points. And you guys know, I'm not really on the BS and the hocus pocus type stuff. I don't really talk about that. And even when you talk about mindset, I think this is a critical thing, because when you really allow yourself to understand it more on a deeper level, you'll start to understand how much power you actually have over your life, regardless of the situations around you, regardless of, your financial situation, your employment situation, any of those things. You actually have a lot more control over your life than you think or you give yourself credit for. And a lot of that starts upstairs in your mind, and creating kind of the mindset and the thoughts and the beliefs that lead to the actions that drive it. So I want to transition just a little bit. Let's talk about your podcast for a second, okay? You got the Investor Mindset podcast. You have absolutely crushed it. It's one of the top podcasts out there, top 200 podcasts all around. What was the inspiration to launch this show, and how did you get so much success so fast?
So the inspiration was that, very early on, I started listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and that made such a big difference in my life. And I saw these amazing conversations with incredible people. And I thought to myself, how do I get in front of folks like that? How can I, both serve and from a fulfillment standpoint, do things that are going to really help others? And how do I have some amazing conversations with folks, right? How can I connect with some incredible people? And so when I decided to do it, I had set a goal, nearly a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago. And I kind of set that out. And I hadn't planned on doing it for about 6-month timeline from setting that goal. But because I had that clear goal in mind, I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish. When I saw the opportunity to start doing it much earlier, I was able to jump on it. I was able to rearrange my goals. I was able to jump on it and really move forward with some incredible vigor. But it was through some relationships, through some meeting some incredible people, talking with Joe Fairless, Whitney Sewell, talking with, being a part of Seth Godin's podcast foundations course, and really diving in and understanding, well, what are some of the key pieces that go into this, and how can I surround myself with other people who are doing really great things in this space and use their belief that it's possible to do, essentially taking that on myself and saying, well, hey, if they can do it, I can do it. And one of the big reasons why we had success really early on was because we had a really clear vision of what it was that each episode was going to be. We were very clear on the format, and we asked some unique questions. But I think what it really came down to was I had an existing network. And when I say that, what I mean is I wasn't afraid to go out and message everybody that I've ever met when I launched. I actually went through, I used a tool called Contactually. I scraped my email database, and everybody who's ever emailed me or messaged me or contacted me ever, they received a launch email where I essentially dropped in their inbox and said, hey, we're going to be launching this podcast. And for about a week before, I let all the people who are close to me, let them know that, hey, I'm launching this podcast. And so very quickly, I was able to get a lot of downloads and subscriptions. And then because of that and some pure luck, we were able to make our way onto the new and noteworthy for over 8 weeks. And so what's amazing in the podcast land is when you're launching a podcast, and I think this is true when you're launching just about anything, you want to try to get as much momentum as early on as you can. Now, I didn't have the best podcast out there. I'm not the best podcaster out, but what I did have was I was willing to go out and ask people for a favor. I was willing to ask them to at least check it out, to take a listen. I was willing to ask them to drop a 5-star review. And very quickly, we had over 100 reviews in the first week, which is part of the reason why we were able to get on that front page. And so what I want to outline about this is that you don't have to be the best. It is important to put something really good out there because, people wouldn't listen to it because they knew me. But then once they listened to it, they were like, oh, wow, that's actually really well done. And so, the quality is important, but don't be afraid to have people ignore you or reject you. Because if I reached out to thousands of people that I've ever connected with, a few of them were probably pissed that I sent them an email saying, hey, download my podcast, or I sent them a text message, or I followed up on every medium I possibly could. But I was going for one specific goal, and that was to make this something that was really fun, that I could connect with a lot of people and that I could reach a lot of people. And I wouldn't be able to meet my mission of impacting millions of people's lives, through mindset and real estate if I wasn't at least willing to step on a few toes in getting out and getting started and not being afraid of being totally rejected.
Man, that's powerful. The willingness to get rejected by some people, really, if you're willing to do that, then you can put yourself in a position to excel with the masses, especially finding that ideal avatar who is looking for this message and the folks who want to support you. And most people will. I think there's a big misnomer that, hey, if you reach out to a lot of the people in your network, you're going to annoy most people. Listen, it's a short message. People may be annoyed, but is it to the point that it's going to crush your friendship or your relationship? Probably not. Worst case, they hit the delete button and they don't read your email or whatever. They ignore it. But you have to reach out. You have to ask. It's something that, for folks who are used to bootstrapping and pulling yourself up, it's hard sometimes to ask other people, but you got to get over it. If you've got goals and you need help from other people to achieve those goals, you have to be willing to ask for help. Stephen, let's move on to our bullseye round. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
So one failure that definitely set me up for success was when I was getting started flipping. We had bought a lot of houses. We were wholesaling houses, and we purchased this home, and it looked like it was just a home run deal. It was on Goose Haven Road out in North Carolina, and it was a property that we paid about $450,000 for, give or take. And we thought it was going to be worth about $700,000. So we thought we were going to end up walking away with a good $100K in net profit. We thought it was going to be a home run of a deal. Well, along the way, we failed to get it sold. We failed to do the right renovations. We failed to manage that property well. And we ended up paying a lot of money to our private investors who were funding that deal. And so at the end of the day, after nearly a year of holding on to this and paying 12% interest for quite a long time on this kind of a loan, we ended up netting a negative of nearly $40,000, which means I lost $40,000 after holding onto this property. But it was one of the best feelings ever to write that $40,000 check because one, I knew that property was off my books and I didn't have to deal with it again. And two, we'd done a deep dive into what didn't work. And we made sure that every property after that never fell into that same place. That kind of dead space when you're flipping 20 or 30 houses at a time, that you might forget about a property because it's not the most fun or the sexiest one, or it just didn't quite get there. We ended up filling that hole and made sure that didn't ever happen again. And thank goodness we lost that money because we ended up making a lot more in the long run because of it.
Give me the book you've gifted or recommended the most in the last year.
The book that I've gifted or recommended the most is definitely, well, it's a combination. It's probably The Go-Giver. It's one of my favorite books. It's a book that's changed my life, and I know it's changed a lot of people's lives. But the other book that I highly recommend you guys check out is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I had him on the podcast recently. You can check it out, where I actually negotiate against this FBI hostage negotiator, and I get my butt kicked. But it's such a good book because it really helps teach you about how to be a better communicator, not only in the business world, but in your own personal life as well.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Okay, probably the go-to digital resource is we use a combination of Slack and Zoom for managing all communication with our team. My whole company is remote, so we have all of our chat communication in one place in Slack, and anytime we need to connect and have that face-to-face feeling, we're jumping into Zoom, and that's essentially how we run everything we do.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
A daily habit that helps me stay focused is kind of my daily morning ritual. And it's 4 things, and it's 4 quick things. And it's meditation, it's movement, it's listening to a little mindset, something that's going to uplift me and put me in the right state of mind. And it's mapping my day, actually sitting down and planning what are the top 3 things that I'm going to do and exactly when I'm going to do them. And those 4 things together end up really setting me up to make sure that I can have a kick butt day and do things the right way.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
I wish I knew that I didn't have to take everything so seriously. That sometimes you need to just flow with things and just go with the flow. And I need to remind myself that even now and probably forevermore, to be honest.
What are you curious about right now?
I'm really curious to see what happens in the world. We're currently going through some amazing times with coronavirus, and depending on when you're listening to this, you'll have some of the answers. But I'm really curious to see how both the economy and the social side of it ends up, working out. How are people going to react to this in the long run? Because right now in the short run, people are experiencing something they've never experienced before. And I'm curious to see how it impacts us on the economic front and what it really does to our business.
All right, Steven, I know you're out in Denver, and right now you probably can't go out to restaurants, but soon that will change. And when that happens, give me the best place to grab a bite in Denver.
My favorite restaurant, my favorite go-to place is a neighborhood spot called El Camino. They have amazing tacos. They have incredible guacamole, and I'm usually there about once or twice a week during normal times.
Steven, great talking to you today. I love talking about the investor mindset, really talking about, kind of how you left your corporate gig to start investing in real estate, really building up as a real estate marketer. I know now you're transitioning. We didn't get a chance to talk a lot about this, but you are now transitioning into larger assets, multifamily, and more. Before our listeners who want to learn more about you, follow your journey, or learn more about the investor mindset, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, I highly recommend you guys go check out the podcast. You can follow us on any place the podcasts are at. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, after interviewing, hundreds of people, we've put together this amazing ebook called The 5 Principles of Investing Success. And you can check that out. You just head over to theinvestormindset.com/value. and you can download that for free. It's incredible. It dives into some really cool things, from interviews with Joe Fairless and Rod Khleif and Kathy Fedke and many others.
Awesome, Stephen. This has been a blast. Great information all around. Love your focus and everything you're working on. We look to talk to you again soon. Take care, okay?
All right. Thanks, brother.